A fiery confrontation unfolds when Clara, a passionate server, refuses to serve Paul, a customer wearing a politically charged red hat, citing her personal values. Her bold stance against what she perceives as a symbol of divisive beliefs ignites tension in the cafe, challenging notions of professionalism and respect. However, the twist comes when Clara learns Paul isn't just any customer, but the owner of the cafe. The story delves into the fallout from Clara's actions, exploring themes of prejudice, personal beliefs clashing with workplace ethics, and the broader consequences of snap judgments in a polarized world. It was a buzzing afternoon at Vine Dine, a bustling cafe nestled in the heart of a lively city neighborhood. Amid the clinking of silverware and the hum of conversations, the staff darted around, balancing plates and smiles. Among them was Clara, a spirited and opinionated server known for her unwavering commitment to her values. Clara loved her job but was never one to compromise on her beliefs, even in difficult situations. That day, Clara's shift took an unexpected turn when a man stepped in, his presence commanding attention, not for his tailored suit, but for the bold red cap perched on his head. It wasn't just any cap, it bore a slogan that, to Clara, symbolized division and ideals she couldn't stand behind. The man, Paul, appeared unfazed by the glances darting his way. He chose a seat by the window, a spot bathed in sunlight, and began scrolling through his phone, seemingly indifferent to the reactions around him. Clara, however, couldn't ignore the knot forming in her stomach. To her, that cap wasn't just an accessory, it represented a set of beliefs she couldn't condone. As she watched him settle in, her internal conflict grew. Clara squared her shoulders, grabbed her notepad, and made her way to his table. Her steps were deliberate but weighed down by the tension in her chest. Her voice was polite but firm when she addressed him. "Good afternoon, sir. Is there something I can help you with?" Paul looked up, his expression calm and collected. "Yes, I'd like to see a menu, please," he said, gesturing to the table. Clara hesitated, her gaze flickering to the cap before returning to his face. "I'm sorry, but I can't serve you," she said, crossing her arms. Her voice, though steady, carried the weight of her unease. Paul raised an eyebrow, his demeanor unshaken. "Can't serve me, and why is that?" Clara took a deep breath. "It's your hat," she said firmly. "It represents values that I can't support. I don't feel comfortable serving someone wearing that." Paul leaned back slightly, studying her with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. "So, based on what I'm wearing, you've decided I don't deserve to be served?" His tone was measured, his calmness a stark contrast to Clara's simmering frustration. "I have a right to refuse service," she shot back, "and I'm exercising that right." The tension between them began to ripple through the room. Nearby diners cast furtive glances at the exchange, the hum of conversation quieting as whispers replaced idle chatter. It wasn't long before Diana, the cafe's manager, noticed the growing discomfort and hurried over to diffuse the situation. "Is everything all right here?" Diana asked, her professional smile masking the concern in her voice. She glanced between Clara and Paul, her brow furrowing slightly at the charged atmosphere. Before Paul could respond, Clara interjected, her voice firm. "I've told him I can't serve him. I'm not comfortable doing so." Diana's expression shifted to one of confusion and surprise. "And why is that, Clara?" Clara gestured toward Paul's cap, her stance unwavering. "It's because of that," she said simply. Diana turned to Paul, her professional smile never wavering. "I apologize for the misunderstanding, sir. I'll be happy to take your order myself." Paul returned her smile graciously. "Thank you," he said, his tone calm and polite, though his eyes lingered on Clara for a moment longer. Clara stood rooted in place, her chest tightening as she watched Diana step in to serve Paul. For Clara, it wasn't just about the hat, it was about what it represented and her conviction to stand by her principles. But in that moment, the weight of her decision began to settle over her, and she couldn't help but wonder if she'd gone too far. As the lunch rush continued, Clara found herself unable to shake the encounter. The room bustled around her, but her mind was stuck on Paul's calm demeanor and his pointed question. "So based on what I'm wearing, "You've decided I don't deserve to be served?" The words echoed in her mind, and for the first time, doubt crept in. Had she judged too quickly? Was it fair to make assumptions about a person based solely on something as simple as a hat? Clara prided herself on being someone who stood for justice and equality, yet the confrontation left her feeling unsettled. Later that afternoon, as the cafe quieted down, Paul stood to leave. He approached the counter where Diana stood, thanking her for the meal and service. Before walking out, he glanced at Clara, offering a polite nod. "Thank you for your honesty," he said, his tone neutral, but carrying a weight that lingered long after he walked out the door. Clara didn't know what to make of his words. They didn't feel like an attack or a jab. If anything, they felt like an invitation to think deeper, about herself, her beliefs, and the assumptions she made about others. Little did she know, the truth about Paul would soon upend everything she thought she knew, forcing her to confront her own biases in a way she never expected. This was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge her convictions and redefine her understanding of what it truly means to stand for something. "I'll have the house special and a black coffee, please," Paul said politely, handing the menu back to Diana. She nodded and walked away to place his order, her professional demeanor intact, despite the tension lingering in the air. Across the room, Clara watched the exchange with a mix of frustration and dismay. To her, Diana's decision to serve Paul felt like a betrayal of the shared values Clara believed they upheld as a team. She muttered under her breath before turning to her other tables, her irritation simmering beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Paul remained seated by the window, quietly observing the restaurant's bustling activity. He showed no outward signs of irritation or discomfort, maintaining a composed and steady presence despite the earlier confrontation. When Diana returned with his order, she placed it gently on the table and offered her usual warm smile. "If there's anything else you need, please don't hesitate to let me know," Diana said with her signature professionalism. Paul nodded, taking a moment to meet her gaze. "Thank you," he replied. "It's rare to see someone handle a situation like this with such grace and professionalism." Diana hesitated, momentarily caught off guard by the remark, but returned his smile politely before moving on to attend to her other customers. Paul finished his meal in silence, leaving a generous tip on the table before gathering his belongings. Clara couldn't help but notice him as he left the restaurant, her frustration still palpable. To her, Paul represented something larger than a simple customer, an embodiment of beliefs she felt deeply opposed to. What Clara didn't know, however, was that Paul wasn't just another diner. The truth about who he really was would come to light the following day, forcing Clara to confront the consequences of her decision. The next morning, the cafe hummed with its usual rhythm as Clara prepared for her shift. She had spent the night replaying the confrontation in her mind, resolute in her belief that she had done the right thing. But as she tied her apron and glanced around the restaurant, she noticed Diana walking toward her, phone in hand and a serious expression on her face. "Clara, I need to speak with you after the morning rush," Diana said. Her tone firm, but measured. Clara raised an eyebrow, but nodded, assuming it had something to do with yesterday's events. Shrugging it off, she returned to serving her tables, unaware of what was about to unfold. Meanwhile, across town, Paul placed a call to the restaurant. Diana answered, her voice professional as always, though she wasn't expecting the calm, measured tone on the other end of the line. "This is Paul," he began. "I wanted to thank you for the way you handled yesterday's situation. The food was excellent, and your service was commendable." Diana felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you, sir. I appreciate your kind words," she replied, but just as she prepared to thank him for his feedback, Paul's tone shifted. "However," he continued, his voice steady, "I need to address the behavior of one of your staff members. Refusing service based on personal beliefs isn't just unprofessional, it's unacceptable. In a workplace like this, fostering an inclusive environment is essential. Customers should feel welcome, regardless of differing perspectives." Diana's stomach tightened. Though taken aback, she listened carefully, nodding along as Paul spoke. "I completely understand," she said, apologizing on behalf of the restaurant. "I assure you that the behavior will be addressed immediately." But what Paul said next left her stunned. "I should also let you know," he said, his tone unwavering, "I'm not just a customer, I'm the owner of this restaurant." Diana froze, her mind reeling as she tried to process the revelation. The man in the red hat, calm, composed, and quietly observing, was her boss. Paul continued, explaining that he intended to meet with both her and Clara later that day to resolve the matter. That afternoon, Diana called Clara into the office. Clara entered, her posture defensive, already suspecting what the conversation would be about. "Is this about yesterday?" she asked, her tone curt as she crossed her arms. Diana nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, it is. I've spoken with Paul, the man you refused to serve." Clara's defenses rose instantly. "Look, Diana," she began, her tone laced with frustration. "I stand by what I did. That hat represents—" Diana held up a hand to stop her. "Let me finish," she said, her voice calm but firm. "There's something you need to know about Paul. He's not just a customer, he's the owner of this cafe." Clara froze, her words catching in her throat. "What?" she managed, her disbelief evident. "Yes," Diana confirmed. "He called this morning to thank me for handling the situation professionally, but also expressed his disappointment in your actions. He made it clear that refusing service based on personal beliefs goes against everything this cafe stands for." Clara felt the weight of Diana's words settling heavily on her shoulders. Her mind raced as she tried to reconcile her principles with the consequences of her actions. She opened her mouth to respond, but Diana interrupted. "Paul wants to meet with both of us this afternoon," she said. "He wants to address this directly." Clara's stomach churned. The idea of facing Paul again, now knowing who he really was, felt daunting, but there was no avoiding it. As she left the office to prepare for the meeting, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that the confrontation was about more than her actions. It was about her values, her assumptions, and the uncomfortable possibility that she might have been wrong. "I stand by my actions," Clara said, her voice firm despite the tension in the room. "That hat represents values I can't support, and I have the right to refuse service if it makes me uncomfortable." Diana's expression hardened, though her tone remained calm and controlled. "Clara, personal beliefs are one thing, but when you're on the clock, your job is to serve every customer with professionalism and respect. What you did not only went against company policy, but also jeopardized the welcoming atmosphere we strive to maintain here." Clara opened her mouth to argue, but Diana raised her hand to stop her. "There's something you need to know," she said. "Paul isn't just any customer." Clara frowned, sensing the weight behind Diana's words. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "He's the owner of this cafe," Diana revealed, her tone direct. "He didn't disclose that yesterday, but he called me this morning to address what happened. He wants to meet with us this afternoon to discuss the incident." Clara froze, her arms falling limply to her sides. "The owner," she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mind raced as the realization hit her like a wave. The man she had dismissed so casually wasn't just another diner. He was her employer. Panic and regret surged through her, and for the first time, Clara truly grasped the gravity of her actions. Later that afternoon, Clara found herself sitting in Diana's office across from Paul. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and Clara avoided Paul's gaze as he began to speak. "Clara," Paul said, his voice calm but firm, "I wanted to meet with you directly to talk about what happened yesterday. I'd like to hear your perspective." Clara hesitated, her palms clammy as she fumbled for words. I felt uncomfortable serving you because of your hat," she admitted, her voice trembling. "It represents values I strongly disagree with, and I thought I had the right to refuse service." Paul nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I see," he replied. "Do you think it's fair to judge someone entirely based on an article of clothing?" Clara faltered, her carefully rehearsed reasoning crumbling under his measured response. She opened her mouth to reply, but found herself at a loss. The flaw in her actions became starkly clear, and her cheeks flushed with shame. Paul continued, his tone steady but resolute. This isn't just about me. Your actions could have harmed the reputation of this cafe and what it stands for. A place where everyone, regardless of their background or beliefs, feels welcome. In this business, professionalism means putting personal feelings aside to create a positive experience for all customers. Clara nodded, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. I understand, she said softly, her voice barely audible. I let my emotions get the better of me, and I know I made a mistake. Paul leaned back in his chair, taking a moment to collect his thoughts. The silence was heavy as he finally spoke again. Clara, after reflecting on what happened, I've made a decision. I'm not going to terminate your employment. Clara blinked in surprise, her heart skipping a beat. She had prepared herself for the worst, expecting to be fired on the spot. You're not? She asked cautiously. No, Paul said, his tone still firm but carrying a hint of understanding. However, there will be consequences effective immediately. You're being placed on a 2-week leave. Clara's initial relief was short-lived, replaced by a sinking feeling in her stomach. A leave, she repeated, her voice cracking slightly. Yes, Paul confirmed. This isn't a punishment, but an opportunity for you to step back and reflect on what it means to be a professional in a setting like this. This cafe serves people from all walks of life, and while I respect that you have personal beliefs, those beliefs cannot interfere with your duties. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them in her lap. I understand, she said softly. I know I need to do better. Paul leaned forward, his voice softening slightly. This isn't just about one incident, Clara. It's about seeing the bigger picture. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do to grow from them. Use this time to reflect and come back with a fresh perspective. Diana, who had been silently observing the exchange, finally spoke up. Clara, we value you as a member of this team, but we also need to uphold the principles this cafe was built on. Take this time to think about how you can align your actions with those values. Clara nodded, her emotions a mixture of regret and gratitude. Thank you for giving me another chance, she said earnestly, meeting Paul's gaze briefly before leaving the office. As she walked out, the reality of the leave weighed heavily on her, but so did the opportunity to prove herself. During her 2-week leave, Clara found herself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions, shame, frustration, and regret. She replayed the incident with Paul repeatedly, questioning why she had let her personal feelings dictate her actions in a professional setting. Determined to understand the deeper implications of her behavior, Clara sought advice from those closest to her. Her best friend, Sophie, was the first person she confided in. Like Clara, Sophie shared similar beliefs, and her response was sympathetic. I get why you did it, Sophie said during a late-night call. It's hard to serve someone when you feel like they represent something you're fundamentally against. Honestly, I might have done the same. While Sophie's words offered momentary comfort, they didn't ease Clara's guilt. Seeking a broader perspective, she reached out to her older brother Liam, a pragmatic thinker who often challenged her views. I understand where you're coming from, Liam said when they spoke. But at the end of the day, your role as a server is to provide good service, not judge people refusing to serve someone because of a hat. It's the same kind of intolerance you're trying to oppose. Though his words stung, Clara couldn't deny the truth in them. Finally, she turned to her mother, a retired teacher known for her wisdom and gentle honesty. Clara, you're entitled to your beliefs, her mother said during their conversation. But how you act on those beliefs matters. People don't change through confrontation or judgment. Sometimes the best way to inspire change is to lead by example, with kindness and understanding. Her mother's words stayed with her as Clara began reflecting on her actions more deeply. Curious to learn more about Paul, she searched his name online, unsure of what she might uncover. What she found astonished her. Article after article painted a picture of a man who was more than just a successful entrepreneur. Paul had built the cafe chain from the ground up, prioritizing community engagement at every turn. He had created jobs for struggling parents, mentored young professionals, and donated generously to local charities. The red hat, which Clara had so quickly judged, no longer seemed to define him. Instead, She saw a man who cared deeply about others, regardless of their beliefs or backgrounds. Her snap judgment had blinded her to the person behind the symbol. By the end of the first week, Clara felt a growing determination to make amends. She knew she had let her emotions cloud her professionalism and missed an opportunity to learn from someone who embodied values of leadership and compassion. Sitting at her kitchen table, Clara poured her thoughts into an apology letter addressed to Paul. "Dear Mr. Reynolds," she began, her handwriting steady but deliberate, "I want to sincerely apologize for how I treated you during your visit to the cafe. My actions were unprofessional and unfair, and I deeply regret allowing my personal feelings to interfere with my responsibilities." Clara acknowledged her mistake, admitting that her assumptions about Paul had clouded her judgment. She expressed her remorse and thanked him for giving her the chance to reflect and grow. "I hope I can earn back your respect and show you that I am committed to doing better," she concluded. When her 2-week leave ended, Clara returned to the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. The familiar hum of activity brought both comfort and nervousness. Before starting her shift, Clara approached Diana and handed her the letter. "I want him to know how sorry I am," she said earnestly. Diana nodded, sensing Clara's sincerity. "I'll make sure he gets this," she replied with a small smile. Clara exhaled deeply. She couldn't change the past, but she was determined to make things right moving forward. "I'll make sure he gets it," Diana said, taking the letter with a small nod of approval. Clara returned to her duties with a renewed sense of determination. From the moment she tied on her apron, she committed herself to proving through action that she had learned from her mistakes. Throughout the day, Clara greeted every customer warmly, moved swiftly to assist her colleagues, and ensured that each table she served received excellent care. She knew words weren't enough. Her effort and attitude had to speak louder. By the end of her first day back, Clara was both physically exhausted and emotionally fulfilled. Though unsure of how Paul would respond to her letter, she felt proud of herself for owning her mistakes. It was a small step, but it symbolized her commitment to growth. A few days later, Clara approached the most daunting part of her journey, apologizing to Paul in person. She had rehearsed her words countless times, but as she made her way toward his usual corner booth, her heart raced and her hands trembled. Paul looked up from his paperwork as she approached, his expression calm and unreadable. He set his papers aside, watching her with quiet interest. Clara took a deep breath and spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Mr. Reynolds, I want to personally apologize for how I treated you during your visit," she began. "I let my personal feelings get in the way of my responsibilities, and that was wrong. I'm deeply sorry for my actions and for the disrespect I showed you." Paul listened intently, his gaze unwavering but free of judgment. When Clara finished, he nodded thoughtfully and gestured for her to sit across from him. She hesitated before complying, folding her hands nervously in her lap. "Thank you for saying that," Paul said finally, his tone calm but firm. "It takes courage to admit when you've made a mistake, and I appreciate your willingness to take responsibility." Clara felt a wave of relief but remained focused. "I know I let you down, not just as a customer but as my employer," she admitted. "I've spent the past 2 weeks reflecting on what happened, and I'm determined to do better, not just for the cafe but for myself." Paul leaned forward slightly, his tone steady and measured. "Clara, we all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them and how we grow afterward. This cafe serves people from all walks of life, and it's not about agreeing with everyone's beliefs or values. It's about treating everyone with respect and professionalism." Clara nodded, absorbing his words. "I understand that now," she said earnestly. "I let my assumptions cloud my judgment, and I deeply regret it. I want to prove that I've learned from this experience." Paul offered a faint smile, his tone softening. "I believe in second chances, Clara, but this isn't just about proving yourself to me. It's about how you approach your work, your team, and the people who walk through those doors. The values we uphold here aren't just policies, they're principles that define who we are as a team." Clara's chest tightened with emotion, but she managed a small, sincere smile. "I promise to do everything I can to make things right," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. Paul leaned back, his expression easing into something warmer. "Good. I've seen people come back stronger after moments like this, and if you're willing to continue learning and growing, I have no doubt you'll be one of them." Clara stood to leave, feeling a sense of both relief and purpose. The conversation had reaffirmed her commitment to approach her work with humility, respect, and professionalism. She left the booth knowing she'd been given an opportunity that not everyone receives, and it was up to her to make the most of it. Clara returned to the cafe determined to prove her growth, not just to Paul, but to her entire team. However, the road wasn't without challenges. During her first few days back, some of her co-workers were distant, still wary after the incident. The tension was palpable, but Clara didn't let it deter her. From the start, she threw herself into her work with renewed focus and energy. She greeted every customer with genuine warmth, regardless of their appearance or background, whether it was refilling drinks, clearing tables, or stepping in to assist with customer concerns. Clara tackled every task with humility and enthusiasm. Over time, her efforts began to change perceptions. Slowly but surely, her co-workers noticed the shift in her demeanor. Clara wasn't just working harder, she was working differently, with a sense of purpose that inspired those around her. One afternoon, Diana approached her during a quiet moment. "You've been on top of everything lately," Diana remarked, her tone warm. "It's good to see you stepping up." Clara smiled, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Diana. I'm just trying to make things right." Her interactions with Paul also began to evolve, initially brief and professional. Their conversations grew more natural as he noticed the consistency in her behavior. Clara had transformed from someone caught up in personal conflicts to a leader who led by example. She had become someone her team could count on, and the respect she earned was genuine. Clara also took it upon herself to help her co-workers whenever they faced challenges. When a nervous new hire hesitated to serve a demanding customer, Clara stepped in with a reassuring smile. "It's all about treating people with respect," she said gently. "I've learned that judging too quickly doesn't help anyone. Just be patient and listen." Her words carried weight because they came from experience. Over time, the once tense atmosphere surrounding Clara's return faded, replaced by camaraderie and mutual respect. Her colleagues began to see her not as someone defined by her past mistakes, but as an example of how growth and reflection could lead to something better. By the end of her first month back, Clara had not only rebuilt trust with her team, but had also gained their admiration. She understood that respect wasn't just about how she treated customers, it was about how she treated everyone around her. Her transformation reminded everyone, including herself, that growth often comes from the hardest lessons. Clara's journey didn't just change her, it left an impact on the entire cafe. Watching her progress, Paul reflected on the incident and saw it as a valuable teaching moment. It reaffirmed his belief that the cafe's mission extended far beyond serving coffee and food. It was about fostering an environment of mutual respect, understanding, and growth for the staff and the customers alike. One day, as Clara served a table with her characteristic warmth and professionalism, Paul caught Diana's attention. "She's come a long way," he remarked with a faint smile. Diana nodded in agreement. "She has, and she's made this team stronger because of it." Clara's dedication to her work, her team, and her own growth turned her into a standout employee, known for her professionalism, kindness, and leadership. Her experience inspired her co-workers and strengthened the cafe's bond as a team. In the end, Clara learned that growth isn't about perfection. It's about embracing mistakes, taking accountability, and striving to be better every day. Her journey was a testament to the power of second chances and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. Have you ever had a moment where you realized you were wrong about someone? Share your story in the comments below. If you enjoyed this tale of growth and second chances, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more inspiring stories.